Welcome, everybody. This is the middle grade author panel for WonderCon 2021. I have a terrific set of guests with us today, and I'm going to provide some introductions. Let me share my screen. So first, for those that are not familiar with the term, middle grade is for typically 9 to 12-year-old readers. Hey, I have a quick question for my panelists. Somebody unmute and tell me if you can see the PowerPoint or whether you're seeing Henry.
I can see the PowerPoint.
I see the PowerPoint.
Cool. All right. Not that we don't want to see Henry, but I want to make sure they can see the PowerPoint. All right. So let's go to the first slide. Bruce Coville is the author of over 100 books, which have appeared in over a dozen countries around the world and sold more than 16 million copies. His work includes The Aliens Ate My Homework, My Teacher is an Alien, Unicorn Chronicles, Enchanted Files, and Magic Shop Books series, among many other titles. He founded Fullcast Audio, an audiobook company dedicated to creating unabridged full-cast recordings of the best in children's and YA literature. Find him at www.brucecoville.com. Excuse me. Stacia Deutsch is a #1 New York Times best-selling author of more than 300 books. In addition to her award-winning creative chapter book series, Blast of the Past, Stacia has also ghostwritten for a popular girls' mystery series, published nonfiction text, and penned a young adult horror story. She has also written popular titles for Lego, Girls Who Code, The Friendship Code, and Spirit, Riding Free. Additionally, Stacia has written junior movie tie-in novelizations for summer blockbuster films, including Boss Baby 2, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs Jr. movie novel, and the Smurfs movie novels. Find her at staciadeutsch.com. Nancy Holder is the 5-time Bram Stoker award-winning New York Times bestselling author of the YA dark fantasy series, The Wicked Saga, with Debbie Vigouet, sorry if I mispronounced her name, which was optioned by DreamWorks. She has written early reader, middle grade, young adult, and adult fiction and nonfiction, including episode guidebooks and in-world material for TV shows such as Teen Wolf, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Wishbone, and many others. Her middle grade works include the series Nancy Drew, Camp Confidential, and Pretty Freakin' Scary, all under house names. She received a Young Adult Literature Pioneer Award from RT Booksellers and was named the 2019 Grand Master for the International Association of Media Tie-in Writers. I was there when that happened. In addition to novelizing films such as the recent Wonder Woman and Crimson Peak, she has written dozens of original novels, comic books, and online games, and over 100 short stories. Find her at www.nancyholder.com. Rajani Larocca is the author of critically acclaimed picture books and middle grade novels, including Midsummer's Mayhem, Red, White, and Whole, Much Ado About Baseball, 7 Golden Rings, and Bracelets for Bina's Brothers. Her books have garnered starred reviews, Kirkus Best Book, Massachusetts Book Award, Nerdy Book Club Award, and Junior Library Guild Gold Standard. Born in Bangalore, India, she immigrated to the US as a baby. She later attended Harvard College and Harvard Medical School and trained in internal medicine at Massachusetts General Hospital. Find her at rajanilarocca.com. Henry Neff is the author and illustrator of 6 epic fantasy novels, including the 5-book Tapestry series from Random House and Imperium from HarperCollins. The Tapestry series received accolades such as the Texas Bluebonnet, the Missouri Truman Award, and the Northern California Book of the Year, while Imperium was named to the Texas Lone Star list, is an Amazon teacher's pick, and was Entertainment Weekly's top middle grade book of 2016. A former history teacher, Henry lives in Montclair, New Jersey with his wife and 2 children. Find him at henryhneff.com. I'm the author of 10 picture books and a chapter book with short stories appearing in a range of anthologies and markets, including Highlights for Children and Ladybug Magazine. I am co-editing 2 upcoming projects, The Hitherto Secret Experiments of Marie Curie, a young adult horror for Blackstone Publishing, and Coming of Age, 13 B'nai Mitzvah Stories, a middle grade Own Voices anthology. Find me at henryherz.com. gonna stop sharing. Okay, so now I have questions for all my authors, and they can feel free to jump in, or I'll just go in alphabetical order. But my first question is a little bit self-serving, which is, which of your books that you have written is your personal favorite and why? Let's start with Bruce.
Oh, that's always a tough one. I mean, you get asked that by kids all the time. My response is always, that's like asking me which of my children I love the most. You know? It's like when you go to your mother and say, who's better, me or my sister? And she says, oh, I love you both in different ways, dear. What a stupid answer. The best answer is, I love you the most, but my mother never got it right. And if forced, put my feet in the fire and say, I'm going to toast your toes like little marshmallows till you answer. It would actually be not a middle grade novel, it would be my second book, a picture book called Sarah's Unicorn. And the reason's kind of important. I think when you start a book, you get something in your head you're trying to create. And what's in your head should be better than you're actually capable of doing. So out of 100 books, I've never written a book as good as the one that was in my head. But Sarah's Unicorn is the one that came closest to what was in my head. So I loved it for that reason. I've been saying that for quite some time, but about 10, 15 years ago, something else happened. There was a carjacking in Florida because, you know, it's Florida. And this woman got her two little kids in the backseat, 8-year little girl, 5-year little boy in the back seat. They realized they'd left something in the house. She says, you stay here, I'll run up and get it. She's up at the house. And this jerk comes running across the lawn, jumps in the car. She sees him, comes back, running back down, but it's too late. He's now zooming down the street with the two kids in the back seat. The little girl in the back seat takes her library book and starts beating over the head with it from the back seat. Wham, wham, stop it, you bad guy, wham. And the guy gets so upset, he stops the car and lets the kids out. And the book she was beating him over the head with was Sarah's Unicorn. So my books save lives.
Okay, no one's going to be able to top that. Stacia, what about you? You're muted. What's your favorite book that you've written and why?
That was the best story. Now I'm going to put out a call to people and ask if anybody has had my book save their life. Kind of flimsy. You know, I have to say my first book, Blessed to the Past, Lincoln's Legacy. I mean, just because it was my first book and to have gotten a publisher and an agent and get that book out there in the world. It's a series about kids who time travel and meet famous people in American history. And I had never written a children's book before. I actually didn't even know how to write a children's book. My friend who ended up doing the research, Rodi Kohan, we were like, we can do this, right? It's got to be easy. It's so not easy, which we quickly discovered, right? But we didn't know what we were doing. So we met in Las Vegas and we brought all of our favorite children's books and we opened them and we counted how many words were in a sentence and how many sentences were in a paragraph and where did the period go and what happens at the end of chapter 3 and what happens at the end of chapter 8. And we kind of wrote this whole thing out and then we sat down and she fed me research about Abraham Lincoln and I wrote this book. And, you know, there's just such a special place in my heart for my firstborn, I guess. Maybe. Yeah, that would be the one.
Great, thank you. Nancy?
Oh, as I've been sitting here listening to the other guys, my answer keeps changing. So it's like when you go in a restaurant and you're going to get that. No, wait, that looks good. So I'm going to shut up my head and I'm going to say one of my favorite books that I've done is Ivanhound, which was a Wishbone book. Wishbone was a series that was created in Texas, and it was on PBS, and it was about a little terrier who would introduce you to classics of literature, and then Wishbone would star in them. So I novelized the script of Ivanhound, and which was Ivanhoe. And when I was trying out, it was very difficult to get through the auditioning process to write the book. A lot of my friends tried out to write Ivanhoe book or Wishbone books and didn't make it. So the editor who was trying me out said, let's see, what do I have left? Let's say somebody has 20,000 Leagues, somebody has Robin Hood. Nobody wants Ivanhoe. I don't know why. I said, I love Ivanhoe. I love it. I'd never read it. And it's like 5,000 pages long. And every night I would cordon off a section of Ivanhoe to read and fall asleep. And so I read Ivanhoe for weeks and I knew everything there was to know about Ivanhoe. Now, of course, I don't anymore, but I remember how excited I was after all that effort that I got to do my Ivanhoe book. So Ivanhound from Wishbone has a huge place in my heart. I loved Wishbone. And the funny part about this whole thing is the guy who created Wishbone did it because he felt guilty because he did book reports based on comics, the comics classics, golden illustrated version of many of the classics of literature. And I did the exact same thing. So I knew I was destined to write for that guy. His name was Kevin Ryan.
Thank you. Rajani?
Oh, this is really hard. So I can't pick a favorite because it is like picking, a favorite child, and that's just not fair. But I will say that the book, my middle grade book that just came out, Red, White, and Whole, was one that I wasn't sure if I knew how to write it. So I feel very proud that I wrote it. It's a novel in verse. It is set in 1983, and it's about a girl who feels torn between her Indian immigrant parents and the life they want her to lead, and her friends at school, and kind of 80s pop culture and fashion. And so it combines lots of 80s music, which is the best, with Indian mythology, and it's in verse, but it has a lot of science in it. So, I wanted to write it in poetry. It came to me as a metaphor, and I didn't know if I could do it. And I did it. And it was kind of like the fastest book I ever wrote. And it is also the book that kind of pulls the most from my own life that I've ever written. So I'm just super happy that it's in the world. And yeah, I'm very happy about that. I love all of my books, but that one I just wanted to talk about in particular.
Great, thank you. Henry, remember to unmute yourself.
Yes, I think I'm unmuted. Now, apologize. It's snowing here, and if you hear a snowblower in the background, that's my neighbor who just happened to start it up now. As I've had the benefit of listening to everybody else talk through, I think, I changed my answer. I think I was tempted to say my first book because it's your first baby, and it's a very special experience, and everything is new. But the more I was thinking about it, I think the book that I'm most proud of writing is actually the fifth book in my Tapestry series, because that was the final book of a series. And anybody who's read a series probably has noticed that they tend to get bigger because there are more storylines and they get more complex. And I found that they were getting sort of exponentially more complex. And so when I got to the final book and I realized that there was no more runway and I had to wrap everything out, that was a real challenge. And I didn't want to drop any storylines. I wanted the book to end with sort of an emotionally resonant finish. And so there was a lot of juggling that was going on. And, ultimately at the end of the day, I think I stuck the landing. I didn't want people to feel disappointed when they got to the end of the series. And so that was a big challenge. And that was something that, I feel like I achieved. And so I'm pretty proud of that.
Great, thank you. We're going to go in reverse order now, so leave your mic on, Henry. So the next question for each of you is, a lot of the people watching this may be aspiring writers, and so especially aspiring middle grade authors. What advice could you, what short advice could you offer aspiring middle grade authors, starting with Henry?
I guess I would have 3 pieces of advice, and I'll make them brief. The first is to read lots of different kinds of books. I can't believe how many different things I find that I'm drawing upon that I might have read when I was 10 or 12 or 8 or 13 or whatever it happens to be. The second would be to take the plunge and have the courage to start. So many people never start because they're worried that not everybody's going to love their work. And I can disabuse you of that notion now. Not everybody will love your work, and that is fine, and that's good. Not everybody loves pizza or peanut butter and jelly either. And then the third piece of advice would be to finish your stories. So many people who, once they take that plunge, then lack either the discipline or the faith in themselves to really push through and finish that story. And I think that's a very valuable lesson to learn at a young age.
Great, thank you. Going in reverse order, Rajani.
Yes, so I agree with all that advice. I would also say to write what you love, because there's a reason why you love it. And if you write about what you love, you're going to have energy in that story. I would say be kind to yourself when you're drafting, because it's not going to be good, and that's okay. And be mean to yourself when you're revising, because you want to make that story as good as you can possibly get it.
Excellent. Nancy? Remember to unmute.
I love both of those pieces of advice, and I especially love Henry's suggestion to finish what you start. I just retired from 14 years of teaching in a Master's of Fine Arts in creative writing program, and the biggest thing I learned over the years was to make my students finish. They said, there's something wrong with this, I don't know what it is, I want to do something else, can I? And I used to say, oh yeah, okay. And the important thing is to learn how to fix your problems. Because if you've written a book and you submit it to an editor or an agent and they ask for a revision, if you don't know how to fix things, you're in a pickle. So be brave enough to start and believe in yourself. And I love to say this is a little controversial, but even God started out unpublished. So nobody on this planet was born having written a book.
Great, thank you. Stacia.
So the most important thing I think when you're starting out, at least for me, is to carve out time to sit in your chair. It is so easy to do a million other things, and there are series we haven't watched on Netflix yet, or take a walk, or stand outside, or eat everything in the kitchen, whatever it is. It's so much easier to do anything other than write. So find some time, sit in your chair, and just tell yourself for the next 15 minutes, it's like exercise, you actually have to build into it. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour. You'll be surprised at how fast the time goes. But to carve out that time for yourself. Pretend like it's your job. You're gonna go somewhere, you're gonna close the door, you're not gonna answer the call or do the laundry or eat snacks or anything for however long that is.
Great, thank you. Bruce?
Yeah, this is all good advice. I would add, keep a journal and journal about your childhood. There's a memory exercise I do when I'm teaching sometimes, where I have people block out 6 boxes on a page and label them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and ask them to come up with memories from each of those grades, first, second, third. And they always start by saying, I can't remember anything. But then as soon as they start to stir up the muck of the subconscious, things come up. You remember more than you think. And those are the ones that come up are mostly powerful memories and probably have story seeds in them. And the second thing I would say is, I would repeat to you, the words of Winston Churchill to the British people during World War II: never give up, never give up, never, never, never give up. And I went to school with people who are better than I am, good as I am, probably better than I am, who will never be published because they gave up, because they put it in their desk drawer, they finished, but were afraid to send it out. And to the best of my knowledge, nobody has ever written a story so bad that the editor drove to their house, rang their doorbell. When they answered the door, they smacked them in the face and said, don't do that again. Your total downside is a little piece of paper that says, no, we don't want it. So toughen up and send it out, and don't give up.
Very good advice. So Bruce, I'm going to stay with you. We're going to change direction again.
Hey, work here, dude.
Can you share with us, I guess excluding a child using one of your books as a weapon, share with us your favorite book event experience. You were at one of your book events, and think of a really fun, positive experience you had in meeting with your readers.
Well, it's not quite fun, but I have repeatedly had, and this sort of helps me feel like it justifies a long career, people who come up and start to cry and say of this or that book. It's often Into the Land of the Unicorns, sometimes Goblins in the Castle. Tell me, this was the book I escaped into in my dysfunctional, abusive childhood. I read this over and over again, and it was a haven for me. And one, it disturbs me that so many people need that escape, but also I think one of the richest things in my life is knowing that I provided a place for them to go when they needed that kind of place to go. And, middle grade fantasy and science fiction are really, especially fantasy.
Bruce is muted.
Yeah, that was my fault. I'm sorry. Bruce, would you please repeat the last sentence of what you just said? I'm sorry.
Booger, Henry. By the way, booger is a very important word in kids' books. Fart, naked, booger, and underwear. Just real winners. It both delights me and saddens me that people can have found this escape, but that they need to find this escape. But children's literature, especially in the middle grade fantasy, I think provides places that you can escape to and live inside. I mean, realistic novels are important, and they're an important part of the literature, but they're not books that you can escape into so much. They're not books that provide a hiding place in the world that you want to be away from. So I think middle grade fantasy and science fiction is particularly good for providing that service to our young readers.
Yep, sure is. Thank you. Stacia?
Oh, that was so profound and so lovely. I don't know where to go from that. So I love getting letters from kids, love it. And I get so sad when they get forwarded through the publishing houses and they're dated like 6 months earlier and then there's no return address. And you're like, oh, there's like nothing I can do. And why does the publishing house sit on them? But I absolutely love getting letters and emails and being part of like the school book fair, you know, where they have to make a board and they do one of your books. It's so fun. So I don't feel like I'm nearly as profound as Bruce, but I've gotten some funny letters. I got one that said that I was their third favorite author, J.K. Rowling, Dave Pilkey, and then me. And I was like,
so that's not shabby.
Man, that's awesome. Like, that's good enough for me. So moments like that. It also reminded me, I mean, being in this illustrious group of writers, I always get like a little shy, like, oh, look, I love you all. I get a little like starstruck around other writers. I really do. And I had this great other writer story, which maybe doesn't apply, but I'm going to make it apply. I was at a book signing in one of those big rooms where they have all the writers in little like rows, right? And so you're kind of sitting next to people in line, and like I'm just signing really fast, and like the kids are like leaving really fast, and I'm sitting next to Andy Griffiths, who wrote the Butt-Cano, like that was one of his like big classics. Bruce probably loved that one. It's that same kind of humor, little gross kind of humor. And his line is like stretching for miles, and I was like, what? Like, why? What is he doing differently than me, except for that he's Andy Griffiths? And then he told me that he draws a little picture in every single book to make the line last longer, so he has more time to talk to the kids. And I was like, that was the most clever thing. And so now, I don't even draw, but it does, like you draw like a little something, something, and first of all, your line gets longer, but it also gives you just that extra little moment to hang out with the children who have come to see you. And I love that. That was one of the best pieces of advice I ever got. Yeah.
Cool, thanks. Nancy.
Unmuting. Wow, I want to say, yeah, that. I'll tell a story on myself. I was trained to be a classical ballet dancer. And I always thought modern dancers were like not as good as us because we were rigorous and we did everything properly and very precisely. And I also have a degree or a certificate in copy editing. So your and it's and all those things, it drives me absolutely out of my mind when somebody does it wrong. So that is kind of a structure I have to fight against. And I just finished co-editing an anthology for the Canyon Crest Academy in San Diego, which is a charter school for kids in Carlsbad and other areas, and they're doing a creative writing anthology, and they're so free. They don't worry, they just write it. And I'm like, yeah, I should just write it. I should just go for it. And it's hard for me to let go of all that structure and properness to just write. And I think that watching them, and I had one where she wrote this amazing poem, and I took colors to keep track of all the things she was doing in the poem, and it was this huge rainbow. And I'm like, this is amazing. So that I take from getting to be a writer, I get to be around other people who do things like that. But I think my funniest story is a story on myself. As I was in a second grade classroom and I brought my stuffed animal to sit on my shoulder while I sat in the big rocking chair and read a story, and I'm reading and I'm thinking to myself, this passage is kind of long. And all of a sudden one of the little second graders goes, this is boring. Yeah, it is. So I skipped a few pages and I said, can I keep going? And they took a vote and like, sure, keep going. But I just remember when that little kid just went, I'm thinking to myself, this is kind of long here. And this kid goes, this is boring. So I was edited that day myself.
Thank you. In the small world department, both my sons attended Canyon Crest Academy. So thank you for your efforts.
Oh, I love Canyon Crest. Yay, Canyon Crest.
Whose turn is it? I think it's Rajani's.
Yeah, so I will tell just two quick stories about Midsummer's Mayhem, which was my debut middle grade novel, and it can be described as A Midsummer Night's Dream meets Cupcake Wars. So it involves magic and baking. And so at one bookstore event, and we duplicated this later, we had a smelling contest for kids with all kinds of herbs and spices in unlabeled jars. And the kids were just like, just what? But then it was really fun and they got really into it and they were like, can we touch them? And I'm like, yeah, nothing is poisonous, I promise. You can touch it. If you want to taste, you could, but it's up to you. And so we had a lot of fun with the smelling contest, but then I also had a couple of events where we had baking contests, and part of what you had to do with the baking contest, just like in the book, there's a story that goes with every baked good. So you had to tell the story of how the baked good came to be. And sometimes it was really touching. It was like, my mom's favorite cake that she always used to make for me, and now I make for her, that kind of thing. But one kid had this kind of green cake with Swedish fish on it. And I was like, well, what is that? And he's like, it's a pond cake. And I think he won, punniest. So it was fantastic.
Great. Henry.
Those are great stories. I have kind of weird things that tie into a number of them. Somebody once drew a picture for me, an author. It was David Sedaris, and he drew a hand giving me the middle finger. So I don't think that David Sedaris is too thrilled with me for whatever reason. That wasn't even all that long ago. But I've, similar to Bruce, I have had some interactions with readers either in person or through emails or things that have been very moving and very touching, where they share with you that the book was really an anchor for them at a very difficult time of their life. Those are always incredibly moving and really remind me of why I'm doing this and the opportunity to have an impact on somebody's life. Sometimes you get a letter from somebody who maybe read one of your books a number of years ago, and now they're writing their own novel and they're starting to go down this path, and they mention you as an influence, and that's incredibly meaningful. But to Nancy's point, you always have those humbling exchanges. I think every single school I've ever spoken to, there's always that kid in the crowd who raises their hand, and you always get asked, how long does it take you to write a book? And I am a painfully slow writer. So whenever I answer, I'm always like, it really takes me kind of, and I start, it's like turns into a therapy session for me. I sit there and I'm like, I don't know, a year, maybe a year and a half, but sometimes I lie to my editor and it might be like a year and 9 months, I don't know. And then the kid, there's always that kid who's just like, guess I'm never writing a book. And I just destroyed that kid's career ambition right there. So I've had the whole spectrum. They're always fun.
Nicely played. And I'd like to share one of my own experiences, which was, I'm friends with Maggie Stiefvater, a very successful and talented writer. She was in San Diego at Mysterious Galaxy Books for a signing of her stuff, but they carry some of my books too. And, there's a big line for her, but some people were buying, my books too. And I'm in line, and the guy like 3 ahead of me, she turns, says, Henry, is it okay if I sign your book? I guess the people wanted her to sign my book as well as her book. So somewhere out there is somebody with copies of one of my picture books with Maggie Stiefvater's signature. I said, it's probably going to increase the value, so definitely go for it. Okay, next question is going to start with Henry still. A common question we get asked as authors is, from where do you draw your inspiration? Where do you get your ideas for writing?
Boy, I just want to make sure I'm not muted. All over the place. And I know that's probably a generic answer, but my parents were both academics. They were art historians. So I was raised, with a lot of weird stuff around the house, a lot of interesting influences. I remember reading things like Beowulf or even seeing things. I remember being exposed to Beowulf when I was very young and getting mixed up thinking that Beowulf was the monster because that sounded like a monster and that Grendel was something else and being very confused by that. You know, and growing up, my parents encouraged us to read quite a bit. I taught history, so I studied quite a bit of history, and I love trying to incorporate history into my books. I also have read a lot of mythology and a lot of classic fairy tales, and so I love when I go into my books trying to weave together elements of real history, grounding my story in our world, but having fantastical elements that might have a mythological basis or something from fairy tales, weaving in art, and always trying to have something, I guess, in it that elevates it and doesn't speak down to younger readers. So something that is going to force them to stretch. I always know I'm doing my job or what I'm trying to do when I have as many adults reading my books as kids. And I feel like that's kind of a good balance, at least for me as a writer, to go for. And to do that, I have to draw on a whole range of influences.
Thank you. Rajani, you're up. I'm going to ask everyone, the time goes really fast. So if you could answer it with greater brevity, that would be helpful.
Okay, so I will just quickly say that when I first started writing, I was afraid that I would run out of ideas. And I quickly realized that I have too many ideas to ever be able to write all of them. But I always describe myself as an omnivorous reader. Like I liked fiction and nonfiction, and I liked comic books and, you know, novels and, you know, poetry and all kinds of stuff. And so that's what I write too. And I love books, and I love science, and I love math, and I love mysteries. And so I kind of incorporate almost all of that into everything that I write.
Awesome. Thank you. Nancy?
When I first started writing, I had a lot of trouble thinking up ideas. I didn't know if they were good or bad. I didn't know if it would make a good story. I really had no idea, and it was very, very difficult. And what I started doing was just thinking of ideas, and I realized over time, I started being freer about it. And I started thinking of more ideas. So I think of it as you are like a car, and you turn on the engine, you have to let it warm up for a while. But once it's warm, you can drive, and you will come up with more and more and more ideas. But for me, it was very hard when I first started out. I would like think one idea, and I might even think it wasn't a very good one, but I didn't have another one. So I think it's like an engine. If you just turn it on and rev it up, it will get warm and you will drive.
Great, thank you. Stacia.
I want to just answer briefly, like, oh, I don't know. Don't you ever look back at what you wrote and you're like, wow, where did that come from? I have no idea. And half of the time when I go back and read the books that I wrote, I'm like, did I write that? And I have to go back into my draft and be like, no, somebody must have done that. Like somebody else did it. No way. Oh, no, wait, I did say that. You know, if the question is like to someone who's trying to write and can't come up with an idea, I would tell them to go get in the shower. That's where I think all great ideas come from. Otherwise, you just gotta, it's that spitting it out on paper. You just gotta sit with your pencil and write anything that comes to you. I mean, I'm hoping that Bruce says journaling again. I think that's such a good idea. It's such a good way. Anything you see in the world. I don't know. There's my answer. Oh.
Thank you. All right, Bruce, you're up. Is it journaling? Remember to unmute. You're still muted, sir.
I thought you were going to do it. You're the one who muted me. I thought you'd unmute me. So, you know, we get that question all the time in schools. And my answer is a smart ass answer that's also perfectly true. Where do I get my ideas? From my idea file. I have a file probably about this thick where I've been stuffing ideas for the last 30 years. And the thing is this, you have to write them down when they come to you. Ideas don't come when you want them. Ideas come when you feel like it. Sit down and say, I'm going to write a story. Now I need an idea. You go, yeah, right, bad chance. You're in the shower. You're driving. You're doing something that keeps the top part of your brain occupied. The under part of the brain, the unconscious mind, is sending you ideas. And if you write them down, you get a great idea today and say, I'll write that someday, but you don't write it down. Someday comes, the idea's gone. You write it down, and when someday comes, it's in that folder, and you find it as you're sifting through the folder. So the big trick, I think, is to write the ideas down when they come to you.
That's a great tip. So let's finish up with, and I'll start with Bruce again. Let's tell us your latest or your upcoming project, a project that you're either working on or is about to come out. Just give our fans a preview of what's coming.
It's a book I'm very excited about. It's called The Thief of Worlds. And I started writing it in 1971. And
so you're slower than Henry Neff as a writer.
Well, I've written full-length novels in 2 weeks, but this one has a grand scheme. I think it was a great idea, but I didn't have the chops to pull it off. But I've never let go of it. And I've been working on it off and on pretty much at some point in every decade since then. And it is, we just got this weekend a gorgeous review in PW for it. And it feels like paying off a promise I made to myself 50 years ago. So I'm very excited about Thief of Worlds.
Cool, thank you. Stacia?
I tend to juggle a lot of balls in the air. And, you know, in some ways my writing is unique. Often I write what the publishing houses come to me and ask me to write. So I'm currently working on a fact book about American history, which has been very nice to dust off that part of my brain. Also, I think now I could get that 5 on the AP US history exam. I just need to take it again. But I'm also doing some short stories that I love. And you know, I think that Bruce is inspirational. I've got some books that need to get dusted off and pulled out again and revised and sent out into the universe again. And I feel like, you know what, the reason that we talk so much, Henry, and this is that we're all in like this COVID time and we're not talking to other writers. This has been like the best panel for me ever. I feel so inspired. I don't know, I'll let you know in an hour what I'm gonna go work on.
Awesome. Nancy?
I have a short story about the Frankenstein creature's cat in Tied In, which is TIEDIN, which is an anthology for a charity for literacy through the International Association of Media Tie-In Writers. And I am editing the final pass. I'm the copy editor on Sherlock Holmes of Baking Street, Rajani. And it's not a cookbook, but it's all these metaphors and stories and essays and articles about Sherlock Holmes and baking. And so very into that, love Sherlock Holmes, and I'm a Sherlockian. So that was—
I need to have that.
Just email me and I will send you a copy when we're all done. Yeah, I will.
Perfect segue. Rajani, you're up.
So Red, White, and Whole just came out this month. I have 4 more books coming this year, but 3 picture books and another middle grade. And I'll tell you about the middle grade because it is called Much Ado About Baseball. It is a companion novel to Midsummer's Mayhem. So it is a magical book, kind of a fresh take on Much Ado About Nothing. And it involves 2 12-year-olds who are math puzzle competitors who end up on the same summer baseball team, and weird stuff starts to happen with baseball and math puzzles. Cool. So I'm excited about that.
Excellent. Henry?
Oh, these all sound amazing. I'm working on a little bit of a different book than I have in the past, a little bit of an older protagonist. It involves a 17-year-old girl whose family has been suffering from a curse for the last 400 years, and she is embarking to try to break the curse, but she has to do so working sometimes with and sometimes against the demon who manages the curse. And so that's been sort of a fun story, and I'm having a lot of that, writing with dueling perspectives.
Nice. And I have, 2 of you will be thrilled to hear that I have a book called The Magic Spatula coming out, which is, it's a contemporary magical realism chapter book. So it's got baking, and our hero is a boy who learns to bake because he has to. Well, we're out of time, so I just want to thank everybody for your fabulous insights into the writing, and appreciate you sharing your time.